You have got to be kidding me right now, and if you're not already sitting down, I need you to find a chair immediately because what I'm about to tell you is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about John Cena, about his legendary career, about his legacy, and about whether the man we've idolized for 2 decades is actually the humble, respectful legend we believed him to be, or if he's just another ego-driven star who can't handle losing to the next generation. John Cena is demanding a rematch after being pinned by Dominik Mysterio at Wargames in what should have been a passing of the torch moment, a beautiful story of the veteran putting over young talent, but instead has turned into an embarrassing display of an aging superstar refusing to accept that his time has passed. And before you Cena fans start furiously typing about how I'm disrespecting a legend, about how I don't understand the business, about how there must be more to the story, I need you to listen to every single word I'm about to say because the evidence of Cena's ego and desperation is overwhelming, it's pathetic, and it completely destroys the carefully crafted image he spent years building as the ultimate company guy who always does what's best for business. By the time I'm done exposing what's really happening here, you're either going to be sharing this video everywhere because you're finally seeing the truth about John Cena, or you're going to be so angry defending him in the comments that you prove my point about how his fans enable this kind of selfish behavior that hurts wrestling and prevents new stars from being made. Either way, you won't be able to stay silent, and I'm counting on your outrage to spread this message to every corner of the wrestling world. Let me set the scene of what happened at Wargames because the context makes Cena's reaction even more disgraceful and harder to defend. This wasn't some fluke roll-up pin that happened in 3 seconds. This wasn't a dirty finish with interference and controversy that would justify a rematch demand. This was a clean, decisive, definitive victory by Dominik Mysterio over John Cena in the middle of the Wargames chaos where Dominik hit his finish, made the cover, got the 3 count, and proved to everyone watching that he belongs in the main event picture. The crowd popped huge for the moment because they recognized it for what it was, a symbolic changing of the guard where an established veteran put over a rising star in a meaningful way. The commentary team sold it as a massive upset and a career-defining moment for Dominik. Other wrestlers on social media praised the performance and the result. Everything about that moment was perfect from a storytelling and business perspective. It elevated Dominik, it gave fans a memorable shock, and it showed that John Cena in the twilight of his career was willing to use his remaining star power to create new stars rather than hoarding the spotlight. Except apparently John Cena didn't see it that way at all. According to multiple sources backstage, and these are people who were actually in the locker room area and production meetings after Wargames, John Cena was absolutely livid about the finish. Not disappointed in a professional way where he's committed to the story but personally unhappy with how it played out. Actually angry, actually throwing around his political weight, actually making demands about getting his win back as soon as possible because he refuses to have a loss to Dominik Mysterio on his record as part of his retirement tour. Let that sink in for a second. John Cena, the guy who spent years giving interviews about putting people over and doing business the right way, the guy who's positioned himself as the measuring stick for the next generation, the guy who's made an entire career out of never giving up and overcoming the odds, can't handle one clean loss to a talented young wrestler who desperately needs the credibility that comes from beating a legend. The hypocrisy is staggering. The ego on display is mind-blowing. And the damage this does to everything Cena claims to stand for is irreparable once you understand the full scope of what he's demanding. Now let's talk about who Dominik Mysterio is and why Cena's refusal to put him over properly is so damaging to WWE's future. Dominik is the son of Rey Mysterio, one of the greatest high flyers in wrestling history and a legend in his own right. Dominik has been working his entire life to step out of his father's enormous shadow, to prove he deserves his position based on his own talent rather than just his last name. He's improved dramatically in the ring over the past few years, developing his own style and character work that's distinctly his own rather than just copying Rey. He's gotten legitimate heel heat as part of the Judgment Day faction, showing personality and charisma that some people doubted he possessed. And most importantly, he's at the exact stage of his career where beating an established legend in a high-profile match could catapult him to the next level and establish him as a legitimate main event player for the next decade. The win over Cena at Wargames should have been that moment, that career-making victory that fans remember forever and that gives Dominik instant credibility whenever he's in a big match situation going forward. But now John Cena wants to take that away from him, wants to diminish that victory by immediately demanding his win back, wants to send the message that beating John Cena doesn't actually mean anything because Cena will just use his political power to reverse any result he doesn't like. The worst part about this entire situation is that it completely contradicts everything John Cena has said publicly for years about his role in WWE and his approach to his legacy. Go back and watch interviews from the past 5 years where Cena talks about the end of his career and what he wants his final chapter to look like. He consistently says the right things about wanting to help create new stars, about understanding that his job now is to pass the torch to the next generation, about being willing to lose to anyone if it serves the greater good of the business. He's given these beautiful poetic answers about how legends are judged not by how many wins they accumulate at the end but by how many stars they help create on their way out. He specifically mentioned wanting to be like the veterans who put him over early in his career, guys who were secure enough in their legacy that they didn't need to protect their win-loss record at the expense of building the future. And wrestling fans, myself included, ate that up. We believed John Cena when he said those things because he seemed genuine, because it aligned with how we wanted to view him, because it made sense given his accomplishments and status in the industry. But apparently it was all talk, all empty words meant to maintain his image, while the reality behind closed doors is completely different. The political maneuvering that Cena is allegedly engaging in backstage is where this gets really ugly and exposes the dark side of how WWE operates when powerful stars refuse to accept creative decisions they don't like. According to sources, Cena has been in meetings with Triple H, with Nick Khan, with anyone in management who has the power to change plans, arguing that having a loss to Dominik Mysterio on his record during his retirement tour damages his legacy and his marketability for the final run. He's apparently framing this as a business issue rather than an ego issue, claiming that fans want to see John Cena winning big matches during his farewell tour, not putting over younger stars who haven't proven they can draw money yet. And that argument, while it might have some surface-level business logic, is completely self-serving and ignores the bigger picture of what WWE needs for its long-term health. WWE doesn't need another year of John Cena winning matches and padding his already incredible legacy. What WWE desperately needs is new stars who feel like legitimate main eventers, young wrestlers who have the credibility to carry the company after all the legends have retired, and moments that make casual fans take notice of wrestlers they might not have been paying attention to before. Dominik beating Cena provided all of those things. Cena beating Dominik in a rematch erases all of that value and sends everyone back to square one with nothing gained except John Cena's ego being soothed. Let's examine what a rematch would actually accomplish and who it would benefit, because this is where Cena's selfishness becomes undeniable. If Cena gets his rematch and wins, which is obviously what he wants, what does that do for anyone? Dominik's big upset victory gets immediately undermined and reframed as a fluke that didn't mean anything. Fans learn that beating John Cena doesn't actually establish you as a star, because Cena will just beat you right back and restore the natural order where legends are superior to new talent. The mystique and unpredictability that made Wargames exciting gets replaced with the same old formulaic booking where the veterans always get their wins back and young wrestlers are just temporary obstacles to overcome. And John Cena gets to feel better about himself, gets to preserve some abstract notion of his legacy being untarnished, gets to maintain his position in the pecking order even though he's barely wrestling anymore and won't be around to deal with the long-term consequences of burying the next generation. The only person who benefits from this rematch is John Cena, and the cost is paid by Dominik, by WWE's future, and by fans who deserve better storytelling than insecure legends needing constant validation. The historical context here is important because WWE and wrestling in general has been destroyed repeatedly by this exact pattern of established stars refusing to put over new talent properly. Think about WCW in the late 90s, where Hulk Hogan and his friends in the NWO spent years burying younger wrestlers and making sure they always came out on top, leading directly to a situation where WCW had no new stars to build around when the old guys finally left or stopped drawing. Think about WWE in the early 2000s, where Triple H famously went over young talent repeatedly during his reign of terror as world champion, killing the momentum of wrestlers like Booker T and RVD who could have been major stars if they'd gotten decisive victories over the top heel at the peak of their pushes. Think about the damage done to an entire generation of WWE wrestlers during the Super Cena era, where John Cena himself beat almost everyone clean for years, making it nearly impossible for anyone to feel like they were on his level because Cena always found a way to win in the end. And now here we are again, with an aging legend who should know better, who should have learned from the mistakes of wrestlers who came before him, demanding to beat a young star who desperately needs the credibility that comes from a clean victory over a legend. It's the same selfish cycle repeating itself, and if WWE gives in to Cena's demands, they're confirming that nothing has changed and that the egos of part-time legends will always take priority over building sustainable long-term stars. John Cena's entire legacy is now in question because of how he's handling this situation. Before Wargames, you could make a legitimate argument that Cena was one of the most unselfish top stars in modern wrestling history. Yes, he won a lot during his peak years, but he also worked an absolutely insane schedule, making house show appearances and doing promotional work that many other top stars refused to do. He put over younger talent when it mattered, like when he put over Roman Reigns clean at No Mercy 2017 or when he helped elevate AJ Styles and Kevin Owens during their feuds with him. He took losses to part-timers like The Rock and Brock Lesnar that didn't really benefit him but served WWE's bigger picture business goals. He seemed to understand that being the top guy came with responsibilities beyond just protecting your own position. But apparently that version of John Cena only existed when he was still a full-time wrestler competing for championships and trying to build his own legacy. Now that he's in the retirement tour phase, now that the pressure is off and he's supposed to be giving back to the business that made him a megastar, his true colors are showing. And those colors are the same selfish ego-driven insecurity that characterizes every aging star who can't accept that their time has passed and that their job now is to make new stars look good rather than protecting a win-loss record that literally nobody except themselves actually cares about. The locker room reaction to Cena's demands is apparently mixed, which tells you everything you need to know about the political divisions and generational conflicts that exist in WWE right now. Some veterans, particularly guys from Cena's era who are also dealing with the transition from active competition to part-time status, are reportedly sympathetic to his position. They understand the psychological difficulty of accepting losses after spending years as protected main eventers. They relate to wanting to maintain credibility and star power even as age and reduced schedules limit their roles. And frankly, some of them probably have their own fears about younger wrestlers surpassing them and making them feel irrelevant, so they're inclined to support Cena's attempt to maintain his position in the hierarchy. But the younger wrestlers, the guys who are grinding every single week and trying to build their own careers, are reportedly furious about this. They see Cena's demands as the epitome of the selfish veteran mentality that holds everyone back. They're tired of being told that putting over legends is an honor while watching those same legends refuse to do the same for them. They recognize that WWE can't build new stars if every important victory by a young wrestler gets immediately reversed because the veteran didn't like losing. And they're increasingly vocal, at least privately, about their frustration with a system that prioritizes the egos of part-timers over the careers of full-time talent. Dominik Mysterio himself is caught in the absolute worst position imaginable here, and the way he has to navigate this situation will define how the locker room views him going forward. If he stays quiet and lets Cena politic his way into a rematch victory, Dominik looks weak, like someone who's not willing to fight for his own spot and who accepts being used as a stepping stone for legends to maintain their mystique. But if Dominik pushes back and advocates for himself, he risks being labeled as difficult or ungrateful, and he potentially makes an enemy of one of the most powerful and well-connected people in wrestling history. It's a no-win situation created entirely by John Cena's ego, and Dominik doesn't deserve to be put in this position after working his ass off to improve and finally having a breakthrough moment. The fact that Cena is willing to put a young wrestler through this stress and political nightmare just to soothe his own ego tells you everything you need to know about where Cena's priorities really lie. He doesn't care about what's best for WWE. He doesn't care about making stars. He doesn't care about anyone except himself and his own legacy, despite all the pretty words he said in interviews over the years about being a team player and wanting to help the next generation. The comparison to other legends and how they've handled the end of their careers makes John Cena look even worse in contrast. Look at The Undertaker, who spent the final years of his career putting over younger talent in meaningful ways, losing to Brock Lesnar, to Roman Reigns, to others in matches designed to elevate them and pass the torch to the next generation. Look at Shawn Michaels, who came back from retirement and worked with younger wrestlers in NXT, using his name value to give them credibility without ever demanding to go over or protect his legacy. Look at Edge, who has been incredibly generous in putting over talent since his return, making people like Seth Rollins and Finn Balor look like stars in their feuds with him. Look at Christian, who just had an incredible late career run in AEW where he elevated younger wrestlers and told compelling stories without ever seeming concerned about his win-loss record. These are legends who understood their role, who were secure enough in their accomplishments that they didn't need to beat everyone to validate their careers, who recognized that the greatest legacy a wrestler can leave is the stars they helped create on their way out. But John Cena apparently can't grasp that concept, or he simply doesn't care because his ego won't allow him to accept being on the losing end of a passing the torch moment with someone he views as beneath his level. The business argument that Cena is allegedly making to justify his rematch demand falls apart completely under any serious scrutiny. Cena claims that fans want to see him winning during his retirement tour, but what evidence actually supports that? When The Undertaker was having his final matches and losing to people like Roman and Bray Wyatt, were fans upset about that? No, they understood it was the right thing to do storytelling-wise, and it made those victories mean more for the wrestlers who got them. When Ric Flair had his retirement match and lost to Shawn Michaels in an emotional conclusion to his career, did that damage Flair's legacy? Obviously not. It's remembered as one of the greatest moments in WrestleMania history precisely because Flair was willing to lose in his final match. Fans are smart enough to understand that a wrestler's legacy is determined by their entire career, not by whether they won or lost their last few matches. Nobody looks at Undertaker or Flair or any other legend and thinks less of them because they put people over at the end. If anything, it makes us respect them more because it shows they truly loved the business enough to prioritize its future over their own egos. But Cena doesn't trust the fans to understand that, or more likely, he doesn't actually care what fans think, and this is purely about his own psychological need to maintain his position in the pecking order. Let's talk about what this says about Triple H's leadership and whether he has the strength to stand up to John Cena's political pressure. Triple H has been praised for his creative direction since taking over from Vince McMahon, with many fans noting that storylines feel more coherent, younger talent is getting more opportunities, and the product overall feels fresher and more modern. But this situation with Cena is a major test of whether Triple H is actually willing to make the hard decisions that are best for business or if he'll cave to pressure from powerful veterans who don't like the creative direction. If Triple H gives Cena his rematch and lets him go over Dominik, it sends a terrible message to the entire locker room that the new regime is just as susceptible to veteran politics as the old one was. It tells young wrestlers that their big moments can be taken away at any time if a legend complains loudly enough. And it undermines Triple H's authority going forward because everyone will know that his creative decisions can be overruled if you have enough political leverage. But if Triple H stands firm, tells Cena that the finish stands and there won't be a rematch designed to give him his win back, that establishes Triple H as someone who truly is putting long-term creative vision over short-term ego management. It shows the locker room that in the new WWE, the story and the future matter more than keeping part-time legends happy. And it proves that Triple H has learned from his own past mistakes where he prioritized his own position over building new stars. The media coverage of this situation has been frustratingly inadequate because most wrestling journalists seem afraid to criticize John Cena directly. There have been vague reports about backstage discussions regarding Cena's schedule and potential future matches, but very few outlets are explicitly reporting on his demands for a rematch or his unhappiness with the Wargames result. This is classic access journalism where media members pull their punches because they're afraid of losing access to WWE or to Cena himself for future interviews and stories. It's the same pattern we see repeatedly in wrestling media where legitimate controversies get downplayed or ignored entirely because journalists have business relationships with the people they're supposed to be objectively covering. But fans deserve to know what's really happening, deserve to understand the political battles and ego conflicts that shape the shows we watch, deserve to make informed decisions about who they support and what kind of behavior they're willing to accept from wrestlers they admire. That's why videos like this are so important, because someone has to be willing to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable and even when it means facing backlash from fan bases who don't want to hear anything negative about their favorites. The psychological component of why Cena is reacting this way is fascinating and reveals deep insecurities that we don't normally associate with someone of his accomplishments and status. John Cena has been at the top of professional wrestling for nearly 2 decades. He's a 16-time world champion, tying Ric Flair's legendary record. He's main event countless WrestleManias. He's transcended wrestling to become a legitimate Hollywood star with a successful acting career. He's made generational wealth and achieved a level of fame that most wrestlers only dream about. By any objective measure, his legacy is secure and his place in wrestling history is guaranteed. So why does one loss to Dominik Mysterio threaten him so much that he needs to immediately get his win back? Because deep down, underneath all the success and accomplishments, John Cena is still insecure about his position and his legacy. He's still bothered by the years of fan rejection during his prime when crowds would chant Cena sucks at him despite WWE desperately trying to make him the beloved babyface. He's still sensitive about criticism that he was pushed too hard and buried too many wrestlers during his peak years. He's still trying to prove something, still trying to validate himself, still unable to simply accept that he had an incredible career and now it's time to step aside and let others shine. That psychological need for validation is what's driving this demand for a rematch, and it's honestly kind of sad to see someone who has achieved so much still being so insecure that one loss to a young wrestler feels like an existential threat. The long-term damage this does to John Cena's reputation cannot be overstated, and I genuinely think Cena doesn't realize how much goodwill he's destroying with this behavior. For years, Cena has carefully cultivated an image as the ultimate professional, the guy who shows up and does business the right way, the locker room leader who younger wrestlers can look up to and learn from. That image has served him incredibly well, both within WWE and in his Hollywood career where producers and directors value working with people who are reliable and drama-free. But demanding a rematch after losing clean to a young wrestler shatters that image completely. It exposes Cena as just another insecure veteran who can't handle not being on top anymore. It reveals that all the talk about wanting to help the next generation was just PR speak that he doesn't actually believe or follow through on when it requires personal sacrifice. And it damages his reputation in ways that will follow him for the rest of his career and beyond. Years from now, when people discuss John Cena's legacy, this moment will be brought up as evidence that for all his accomplishments and positive contributions, he ultimately couldn't resist the same selfish impulses that characterize so many other top stars when they reach the end of their careers. That's tragic, and it's entirely self-inflicted, and it was completely avoidable if Cena had just been secure enough to take the loss and move on. What makes this situation even more frustrating is that Cena absolutely does not need this rematch from a career or legacy perspective. He's already a first-ballot Hall of Famer whenever he decides to officially retire. He's already accomplished everything there is to accomplish in WWE multiple times over. He's already secured his financial future through wrestling and Hollywood success. He has absolutely nothing left to prove to anyone, and that should be incredibly liberating. Cena should be at the point in his career where he can take risks, put over whoever WWE asks him to put over, lose matches in creative and interesting ways that serve stories, and just enjoy performing without worrying about his position or his record. That's the freedom that should come with being a legend who's already secured their place in history. But instead, Cena is apparently so paranoid about how one loss will be perceived that he's willing to engage in political battles and demand creative changes that serve no purpose except protecting his ego. It's a waste of his remaining influence and credibility, and it's a waste of the unique position he holds as someone who could genuinely make a massive difference in creating new stars if he would just get out of his own way. For Dominik Mysterio and young wrestlers like him, this situation is absolutely crushing and represents everything wrong with WWE's culture of protecting legends at the expense of the future. Imagine being in Dominik's position. You work for years to improve in the ring, to develop your character, to prove you deserve a top spot. You finally get your big moment, your career-defining victory over a legend that should establish you as a made man in the wrestling business. You're riding high, excited about what this means for your career trajectory, thinking about all the doors this victory just opened. And then you find out that the legend you beat is backstage politicking to immediately reverse the result, using his power and connections to undermine everything you just accomplished. How are you supposed to feel about that? How are you supposed to trust that WWE actually wants to make you a star when they're seemingly willing to sacrifice your big moment to keep a part-timer happy? And how are you supposed to feel motivated to keep improving and working hard when you see that no matter how good you get or how well you perform, veteran politics can erase your accomplishments at any time? This is how you create a locker room full of bitter, demoralized wrestlers who stop believing in the system and start going through the motions because they've learned that effort and talent don't matter as much as political positioning and backstage relationships. The fan reaction to this situation, once it becomes fully public, is going to be polarized in ways that reveal deep divisions within the wrestling community about what we value and what we want from WWE. John Cena has an incredibly loyal fan base that grew up watching him, that connects his character to their childhood memories, and that will defend him against any criticism no matter how valid. These fans will argue that Cena deserves to win because he's John Cena, because legends should be protected, because Dominik hasn't proven himself enough to deserve a clean victory that stands without being avenged. And on the other side, you'll have fans who are frustrated with WWE's historical pattern of protecting older stars at the expense of building new ones, fans who understand that sustainable business requires constantly creating the next generation of main eventers, fans who are tired of predictable booking where legends always get their wins back. The arguments between these two groups are going to be intense, nasty, and ultimately unproductive because both sides will be talking past each other rather than actually engaging with the substantive issues at stake. But maybe that conflict is necessary, maybe we need these uncomfortable conversations about what we're willing to accept from wrestlers we admire, because without accountability and critical analysis, nothing ever changes and the same destructive patterns just keep repeating. I'm fully aware that by making this video, by calling out John Cena directly and criticizing his behavior in harsh terms, I'm going to face massive backlash from his fans who will accuse me of being a hater, of not respecting his legacy, of attacking him unfairly. But here's the thing, I'm not doing this because I hate John Cena or want to diminish his accomplishments. I'm doing this because I love wrestling enough to be honest about its problems, even when those problems involve beloved figures who we'd prefer to view in purely positive terms. John Cena has had an incredible career and has done many admirable things both inside and outside the ring. But that doesn't make him immune from criticism when he does something selfish and damaging to the business. Legends don't get a pass on bad behavior just because they're legends. And if we truly care about WWE's future and want to see wrestling continue to thrive, we have to be willing to hold everyone accountable when they prioritize their own egos over what's best for the industry. That's what I'm doing here, and if that makes some people angry, so be it. The truth matters more than maintaining comfortable illusions about people we want to admire. John Cena's demand for a rematch after his defeat to Dominik Mysterio is disgraceful, selfish, damaging to WWE's future, and completely contradicts everything he claims to stand for. It exposes him as just another insecure veteran who can't handle not being on top anymore. It shows that his talk about wanting to help the next generation was empty rhetoric, that he abandons the moment it requires actual sacrifice on his part. And it threatens to destroy what should have been a beautiful passing of the torch moment that elevated a young star and gave fans something special to remember. If Triple H and WWE give in to Cena's demands, they're sending a terrible message about who and what they prioritize. If they stand firm and refuse to reverse the finish, they have a chance to prove that the new WWE actually is different and that the future matters more than keeping part-time legends comfortable. The choice is clear, and the consequences of that choice will echo through WWE for years to come. Share this video everywhere, comment with your thoughts whether you agree or disagree, and let's force this conversation into the open where it belongs. John Cena doesn't get to hide behind his carefully crafted image anymore, and the wrestling world deserves to know the truth about what's really happening behind the scenes.